I died the day they chose me. That's the only truth that's ever mattered. Everything before that moment, the gang fights, the rusted streets, the smoke-choked nights feels like fragments of a dream that someone else once lived. I can still see it though, the underhive of Secundus, the endless spires of metal stacked on metal, each layer suffocating the one beneath it. We were born there, in the dark veins of the machine, children of rust and decay. We didn't dream of the stars, we didn't even believe they existed. The day they came, the air changed. The hum of the machines faltered, as if the hive itself held its breath. We heard the sound first, a deep roar that vibrated through the steel floors, like thunder crawling up from the bones of the world. Then the lights turned gold. For the first time in my life, I saw something clean, something divine. They descended through the smog like gods wearing armor. The Emperor's angels, the Adeptus Astartes, their presence broke the hive's chaos like a blade through flesh. People fell to their knees, others ran, but you cannot run from gods. Their armor gleamed beneath the flickering lights, gold and crimson, polished beyond reason. Each step they took echoed, like judgment itself. I was 17, old enough to kill, old enough to die. We had been fighting a gang war that week, the scorpions against the wire dogs, and my hands were still red from it. We thought we were kings, rulers of this rot. Then the angels came, and I realized we were nothing but insects scurrying in the mud. They didn't speak of honor. They didn't offer choice. They came with lists, names gathered by the local enforcers, children marked as fit. None of us knew what that meant. Fit for what? The Space Marine sergeant read our names aloud, his voice distorted through his helmet, every word vibrating with power. When he said mine, Tiber Joral, it felt like the world stopped. My brothers in the gang looked at me with something between envy and pity. No one returns when the angels take you. They gathered 30 of us boys, barely into manhood, the tough and the broken alike. A few cried. Some tried to fight. They were silenced instantly. A single glance from the Marine was enough to crush any rebellion. I still remember the sound of the mother screaming as her son was dragged away. It was the last human sound I would hear for a long time. The angels didn't care about our stories. To them, we were raw material clay to be molded or discarded. They took us to the upper docks, a place I'd never seen. The air grew cleaner the higher we went, though even clean in the hive meant laced with iron dust and burnt oil. We passed through the towering gates, where the industrial smoke parted just enough to reveal the transport waiting above a black ship of adamantium and gold. The symbol of the Imperium adorned its hull, the two-headed eagle, wings spread as if embracing both life and death. The sergeant turned to us, his helmet shaped like a skull, voice booming through the Vox grill. You are not chosen for greatness. You are chosen for duty. Most of you will die. Those who survive will serve until death claims you. There is no glory. Only the Emperor's will. The words struck like blows. Some boys trembled. One spat at the Marine's feet. The Marine's gauntlet moved faster than thought, a flash of red, a wet crack. The boy's neck twisted unnaturally, his body falling limp onto the deck. No one screamed. We just watched as his corpse was dragged away by a servitor, a half-machine thing with dead eyes. That was our welcome. Inside the transport, silence ruled. The hum of the engines was a lullaby of dread. We sat in rows, 30 of us, stripped of names, of families, of everything. The Marine who guarded us didn't move. His armor bore the marks of countless battles, dents, scratches, each one a story written in blood. I tried not to stare, but he was impossible to ignore. He was a mountain of steel, his crimson armor shimmering beneath the dim lights. 7 days we traveled through the void. They fed us once a day a gray nutrient paste that tasted like nothing but filled the stomach like stone. We relieved ourselves under the watch of servitors, slept on the cold floor, and dared not speak. The only sound was the steady hum of the engines and the metallic rhythm of the Marine's armor as he paced. By the 5th day, one of the smaller boys started whispering prayers. Not to the Emperor, we didn't know his words, but to something older, something from the hive. The Marine heard. He didn't speak. He just turned his head slightly, the faint glow of his helmet lenses locking onto the boy. The prayers stopped forever after that. When the ship finally shuddered and slowed, I thought maybe we'd reached hell itself. But what awaited us was worse beauty, so pure it hurt to breathe. The ramp opened, and light, real light, flooded the chamber. Not the pale, dying glow of the hive lamps, but the blinding white of a living Sunday. I stumbled forward, shielding my eyes. Mountains, sky, clouds, things I'd only heard of in whispers. The air was sharp and clean, stabbing into my lungs like knives. For a moment, I thought I'd gone mad. At the heart of the valley rose a fortress carved directly into the mountain, its walls towering higher than the spires of any hive. It looked eternal, older than the planet itself. Statues of warriors lined its entrance, each one larger than life, each one holding a weapon that could tear a tank apart. "Welcome to your grave," the Marine said, removing his helmet. The face beneath it wasn't human anymore. It was pale, scarred, sculpted by war. His eyes cold, depthless, studied us like a butcher examining meat. Yet behind them, I saw something else, a flicker, maybe recognition, as if he, too, had once stood where we stood now. "I am Brother Sergeant Kraus," he said. "From this moment forward, your past is erased. Your names are forfeit. You exist only to serve the chapter, and through it, the God, Emperor of mankind." His words echoed off the stone walls as another figure approached, a man in white robes, his face laced with scars, one eye replaced by a glowing red implant. "I am Apothecary Vaughn," he announced. "You will be examined. Those who pass will begin transformation. Those who fail will serve the Emperor in other ways." No one needed to ask what other ways meant. We were marched through colossal gates into the fortress monastery, a place both holy and horrific. The corridors smelled of oil, incense, and blood. Skulls and relics adorned the walls. Chants echoed through the chambers, praising the Emperor's eternal will. We passed servitors once human, now nothing more than flesh fused with metal. Their eyes were lifeless, their purpose mechanical. I wondered if that was what awaited those who failed. In the examination hall, the air reeked of antiseptic and iron. The walls were white, stained with old blood that no amount of scrubbing could erase. Surgical tools lined the tables, chains hung from the ceiling. "Strip," Apothecary Vaughn commanded. Hesitation earned pain. One boy resisted. He was struck down by a servitor's steel limb. The rest of us obeyed, shivering under the cold glare of the lights. They examined us like livestock, measuring limbs, drawing blood, scanning bones. They spoke in mechanical tones, as though reading numbers, not assessing lives. Subject 17, promising bone density. Subject awesome, malnourished, rejected. Subject 23, lung scarring, note for augmentation. When the examinations ended, 3 boys were gone. No one asked where. We were given grey robes and led to our sleeping quarters, long rows of narrow cots, no decoration, no privacy. A servitor stood at the door, its voice droning. "Sleep. Tomorrow you begin to die." That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the others breathe. Some wept silently, some muttered prayers. I thought of the hive of the scorpions, my gang, my brothers. We had fought for scraps, killed for air, but at least we had names. Here, even that was stolen. I tried to remember my mother's face, but couldn't. Only the smell of smoke and iron remained. I told myself I would survive. I'd survived worse. The underhive was a world built to kill the weak, and I'd clawed my way to the top. Whatever they threw at me, I'd endure it. I'd outlast them all. I didn't know then that survival meant something else entirely. When morning came, it arrived like an explosion, a blaring klaxon that rattled the dormitory. The servitor's monotone voice echoed, "Awaken, proceed to mess hall." We were herded through corridors carved from black stone. The air was cold and thin. The mess hall was vast banners of crimson and gold hanging from the ceiling, the Emperor's double-headed eagle glaring down from above. Space Marines sat at raised tables, consuming their meals with mechanical precision. We, the aspirants, were placed below, given bowls of pale porridge. It was tasteless, but I devoured it anyway. Then Sergeant Kraus entered. Silence fell. Even the servitors seemed to halt. "Today," he said, "we begin to remake you. Your bodies are weak, your minds untested. Some will not survive the conditioning. That is by design. Only the worthy will receive the Emperor's gifts." He pointed toward the mountain trail beyond the fortress gates. "Run. Those who do not return by midday will not eat. Those who fail twice will not live." The order hit like a hammer. We obeyed. The mountain air burned our lungs. The trail wound upward through forests and stone, a path of endless ascent. Most of us had never run farther than a few hundred meters in our lives. The clean air felt wrong. It stabbed like acid in our chests. By the first kilometer, the group splintered. The strong surged ahead, the weak stumbled. I found my rhythm in the middle, my breath ragged, my legs trembling, but I refused to fall. Every step became a prayer of defiance. When I reached the fortress again, the sun was at its peak. My vision blurred, my lungs screamed. I fell to my knees. I had made it. 9 others didn't. That night, we ate. They didn't. And as the darkness fell across the fortress monastery, I realized what service truly meant. It wasn't glory, it wasn't honor, it was obedience until death. I stared at my hands, the same hands that once gripped knives in the hive wars, and wondered how long they would remain mine. I didn't know it yet, but this was only the first death. The boy I had been was already beginning to fade. The fortress did not sleep. Even when the suns dipped beneath the jagged ridges of the mountains, the walls hummed with the sound of machinery, the endless rhythm of devotion. Servitors stalked the corridors in silent processions, carrying weapons, armor, and the dead. I learned quickly that in this place, nothing was wasted, not effort, not time, not even failure. We were the Emperor's clay, and the sculptors would break us until we were ready to be remade. The second day began before dawn. The klaxon shrieked again, jolting us from thin, restless dreams. My body ached from the run, my lungs still burned from the cold air. I thought briefly of refusing to rise, but then I heard the heavy footfalls of the training overseer, and the thought died before it could breathe. Brother Sergeant Kraus entered the dormitory like a living tank, his crimson armor dull in the pale morning light. Behind him marched 2 servitors, dragging what looked like bundles wrapped in cloth. When they dropped them onto the floor, I saw the truth bodies, boys from our ranks, pale and still. "They failed to rise," Kraus said. "Failure is death. Remember that." No one spoke. No one looked away. The servitors hauled the corpses out, their metal limbs creaking. The sergeant turned toward us, his skull-helmed face like an idol of war. "Today," he said, "you learn discipline. Discipline, mon pain." We were herded into a chamber, cut into the mountain, an arena carved from black stone, lit by the glow of burning censers. The smell of incense mixed with sweat and blood, the perfume of the Imperium. On the walls, banners depicted warriors in battle, each one inscribed with words I didn't yet understand. At the far end stood a row of wooden staves, weapons, primitive but deadly in skilled hands. "Take one," Kraus ordered. We obeyed. Fight. No pairings, no rules, just chaos. 30 boys, now 27, collided in a storm of wood and flesh. The sound was immediate and brutal. Thuds, cries, the crack of ribs. I swung wildly at first, instincts from the underhive kicking in. Every fight there had been for survival, fast, ruthless, without honor. But here, it was different. There was no victory, only endurance. A blow struck the side of my head. I fell, blood in my eyes. A foot slammed into my ribs, another into my shoulder. I rolled, dodged, swung low, and felt my staff connect with something solid, a knee. The boy screamed. I rose, breath ragged, and struck again. When the horn finally sounded, 7 lay unconscious, 3 were dragged away, and the rest of us bled in silence. Kraus paced before us, his voice a sermon of iron. "Pain is not your enemy, it is your teacher. Through pain, you learn obedience. Through obedience, you find strength." He gestured to the fallen. "Those who cannot rise will serve in other ways." The other ways had become a mantra. We never saw those boys again. That night, as we lay on our cots, I pressed a hand to the bruise on my ribs and whispered to myself, "Obedience until death." It was easier to repeat the words than to think. The days blurred after that. Running at dawn, combat drills, hunger, cold, every failure punished, every breath earned. By the end of the first week, our number had dropped to 20. Those who remained were harder, leaner, quieter. The fear had faded, replaced by something worse: acceptance. Then came Apothecary Vaughn. He entered our training yard, accompanied by servitors and medici drones. His white robes were stained with what looked like rust, but I knew it wasn't rust. His mechanical eye whirred as it swept across us. "Preliminary implantation begins tomorrow," he said. "Only those whose bodies have adapted will proceed." His tone was detached, as if speaking about machinery, not men. That night, none of us slept. We didn't know what implantation truly meant, only that it would change us. Some whispered that it was the moment we became gods, others that it was when we stopped being human. Both were right. The next morning, we were marched to the Apothecarian, a massive wing of the fortress that reeked of sterilization and steel. The walls gleamed white under surgical lamps. The floors were slick from constant cleaning, though old stains lingered: brown, red, human. Rows of metal tables filled the chamber, each fitted with restraints. I felt my breath quicken. Apothecary Vaughn moved between them like a priest before an altar. His assistants, lesser medicae, part machine themselves, prepared instruments and vials. "Strip," Vaughn commanded. "You will be cleaned." We obeyed. Servitors scrubbed our skin with burning antiseptic, scraping away grime and hair alike. The stench made my eyes water. Then came the examination. Needles, scanners, questions we didn't understand, every measurement recorded with mechanical precision. Vaughn's voice echoed over the hiss of machinery. Subject 12, compatible. Subject 6, discard. Subject 9, elevated bone density, proceed. When he reached me, he paused. His augmetic lens clicked softly as it focused. Subject 11, he said, hive-born, genetic resilience adequate. Proceed with secondary heart implantation. A cold metal tag was clipped to my wrist. That was my fate sealed. They didn't sedate us. The drugs they used kept the mind awake while paralyzing the body. I felt every incision, every violation of flesh. My screams were silent, trapped behind locked muscles. Vaughn's voice floated somewhere above me, clinical and calm. Secondary heart implantation complete. Monitor vitals. Begin integration protocol. I could feel it, a foreign heartbeat echoing against my own. At first, they fought each other, two rhythms clashing inside the same cage of bone. Then slowly, painfully, they began to align. I survived. The boy beside me didn't. His monitors flatlined. A servitor removed him, his body already considered useful material. When it was over, they left me on a cot in a dim recovery room. My chest burned. Every breath was a war between agony and survival. The new heart beat stronger than the old one, pumping a different kind of blood through my veins, one that carried not warmth, but purpose. That night, I dreamed I was drowning in molten gold. Recovery wasn't mercy, it was another test. Every day, the medici came to check the integration. They drew blood, replaced fluids, adjusted the drugs. Each adjustment brought new pain, but I stopped thinking of pain as suffering. It became a signal proof that I was still being remade. We weren't allowed mirrors, but I didn't need one. I could feel my body changing. My lungs expanded deeper, my heartbeat stronger, steadier. Food tasted of nothing. Sleep came only in flashes. When I was deemed stable, I was marched back to the training ground. My robe hung loose over new muscle. My steps felt heavier, not from exhaustion, but from something deeper, denser. Brother Sergeant Kraus was waiting, his bolter slung over his shoulder like a relic. "Your transformation begins in flesh, but it must continue in spirit," he said. "You are not men anymore. You are becoming tools of the Emperor's will." Tools. The word stuck. Tools don't feel. Tools don't think. We began training again, this time under the watch of Brother Chaplain Mordath. He was terrifying, his armor black as the void, his helmet shaped like a skull, voice like thunder in a tomb. We knelt before him in the chapel, a vast hall of marble and bone, candles flickering against statues of the Emperor. "You think you suffer?" he said. "You know nothing of suffering." He told us of the Emperor's agony, his withered form on the golden throne, sustained by the sacrifice of 1,000 souls each day. "He suffers for you. You will suffer for him. That is the chain of service." Then came the chants, liturgies of obedience, catechisms of hate. We repeated them until the words lost meaning, until they became reflex. The Emperor protects, through pain, purity, through death, service. Each phrase carved deeper into our minds. The rhythm of faith became as constant as the pulse of the second heart beating in my chest. By the third week, the second implantation began, the osmodula, the organ that would rewrite our skeletons. They opened the base of my neck and inserted the device, a sliver of living machinery that fused with my spine. I felt it the moment it activated. Heat, pressure, the slow grinding inside my bones. Days passed, and I grew taller. My skin stretched, my muscles burned, my skeleton thickened until my joints creaked with every movement. Sleep was impossible. I could feel myself growing even in stillness. The others changed too. Faces hardened, voices deepened. When we passed one another in the corridors, there was no recognition left, only shared endurance. One evening, after another day of brutal drills, Kra stood before us. "You have survived the first phase," he said. "You are stronger, faster, but strength is meaningless without control. Tomorrow begins mental indoctrination." Mental indoctrination. I didn't understand the words then. I do now. They strapped us into metal thrones. Cold needles pierced our skulls, connecting us to vast machines that pulsed with data and light. Then the visions began. I saw the history of the Imperium, its endless wars, its glory, its rot. I saw alien worlds burning, heretics crushed, planets scoured clean in the Emperor's name. I saw the Golden Throne, radiant and terrible. The information poured into my mind like molten iron. I forgot my name, then remembered it, then forgot again. Images of the hive, of my gang, of my mother, they flickered and dissolved, overwritten by doctrine. I stopped being Tiber Jorel. I started becoming something else. When I emerged from the chair, my hands trembled. I couldn't remember what I'd been thinking before the session. My memories felt distant, like shadows behind glass. Brother Chaplain Mordath stood waiting, his skull helm looming above us. "Knowledge without faith is corruption," he said. "Faith without knowledge is blind. You will know, you will believe, you will obey." I repeated the words without meaning to. The others did the same. It was instinct now. Weeks turned to months. The transformation continued, one organ after another, one lesson after another. I began to feel invincible, and yet hollow. The food tasted of ash. The air smelled of iron. The chants never stopped echoing in my head. I didn't speak much anymore. There was nothing to say. The night before the next surgery, I sat awake in the dormitory, listening to the rhythmic breathing of the others. My second heart beat slow and steady, a reminder of the thing inside me that was not born but built. I remembered a face, a boy I once knew in the hive. He had dreamed of reaching the surface, of seeing the sky. I had mocked him for it. Now I had seen the sky, and I envied his ignorance. I whispered his name, just to hear it once more, but the sound felt foreign, like a word in a dead language. Somewhere deep within the fortress, a choir of servitors began their midnight chant. The sound was mechanical, unfeeling, a hymn to a god who demanded everything. I closed my eyes and tried to imagine warmth. All I could feel was the weight of the machine inside me, beating in perfect rhythm with the Emperor's will. The boy was fading faster now, and I was learning what it truly meant to die while still breathing. By the second month, I no longer recognized the reflection in the polished steel of the washroom wall. The face that looked back was not the one that had stared up through the rusted smog of the hive world. My eyes seemed brighter, their color shifting from dull brown to a sharp amber, and my skin had taken on a pallid hue stretched taut over a frame that was no longer just human bone and muscle. The osmodular had finished its work. I was taller now, broader, my shoulders thick with new strength. Every breath felt deeper, every movement precise, deliberate. But strength came with pain, constant, grinding, gnawing pain. My bones ached as they settled into their new shape. I could feel my joints pulse when I moved too quickly. Pain was the only teacher left. When the klaxon called us to assembly, I rose automatically, driven not by thought but by conditioning. The others did the same. 20 had become 15. The weak had been harvested for other uses, servitors, test subjects, or worse. None of us asked questions anymore. We filed into the apothecarian again, where the air was sterile and the walls gleamed like the inside of a tomb. Apothecary Vaughan waited with his mechanical assistants, their instruments already gleaming under surgical lamps. He regarded us with the detachment of a craftsman examining unfinished work. "You have endured the osmodular," he said, his augmented voice soft but precise. "Now we move to the next phase, the reinforcement of flesh. Today you will receive the biscopia and the hemastamen." He gestured toward the operating tables. "Disrobe, lie down." We obeyed, always. The biscopia was implanted first, an organ that accelerated muscle growth, forcing our bodies into a state of relentless regeneration. Then came the hemastamen, grafted near the heart to modify our blood, making it richer, denser, faster at healing. When the scalpels cut into me, I did not scream. I couldn't. The drugs locked my body rigid, trapping the pain inside like molten metal sealed in iron. My vision blurred with the intensity of it, my mind stretching between lucidity and madness. Apothecary Vaughan's voice was the only constant. Increased red blood cell density at 48%, integration stable, begin closure sequence. Hours passed. When I awoke, I was back in the recovery ward, wrapped in gauze, my body trembling with unfamiliar power. I clenched my fist, and the metal railing beside me bent under my grip. I should have felt triumph. Instead, I felt nothing. The strength was unnatural. It wasn't earned through battle or endurance. It was built, forced, grafted onto me like armor I could never remove. I began to understand what the chaplain meant when he said the flesh is weak. The next phase of training was worse, not because it hurt more, but because it stripped us further of who we had been. Brother Sergeant Kraus marched us into the fortress courtyard, where statues of fallen heroes towered above us, their faces hidden behind eternal helmets. "The biscopia and hemastamen have made you stronger," he said. "Now we test your worthiness to bear them." The test was simple: survival. We were sent into the mountain wilderness with nothing but a knife and a ration pack. We were told to return within 7 days. "Those who do not return," Kraus said, "were never meant to serve." We obeyed. The mountains of Secundus were a world away from the hive. Silence replaced the endless drone of machinery. The sky was open, vast and cruel. I moved through the cold air, each breath sharp as glass in my lungs. My body felt alien, powerful but untrustworthy, like a weapon that might turn against its wielder. The first night, the temperature dropped so low I thought my blood would freeze. But it didn't. My enhanced body burned hotter than it once had, my twin hearts keeping the heat alive within me. I built no fire. Fire was weakness. On the third day, I found one of the others, or what was left of him. His body lay half buried in snow, his throat torn open by something that had teeth like steel. His eyes were still wide. I didn't mourn him. I took his knife. By the 6th day, I had stopped thinking of myself as human. The wilderness was trying to kill me, but it was an honest enemy, not cruel, not deceitful. It demanded strength, not obedience. I could almost respect it. When I finally returned to the fortress, my feet bleeding through the soles of my boots, Kraus was waiting at the gate. 17 entered, he said. 9 returned. You are among them. The Emperor judges you worthy of the next trial. Worthy. I should have felt pride, but all I felt was the ache of my altered muscles and the dull hum of the twin hearts in my chest. The next trial was combat indoctrination, the first time we were allowed to hold real weapons. We were taken to an underground training hall where the air stank of oil and gunpowder. Servitors moved among us, carrying crates filled with wooden practice bolters. They were heavy even in my strengthened hands, their design strange and sacred. Brother Sergeant Krause stood before us, flanked by 2 full battle brothers. Their armor was dark red, engraved with the sigils of the chapter. They radiated authority, a living reminder of what we were becoming. "You will learn to fight as the Astartes fight," Krause said, "without fear, without hesitation, with purpose." We trained until our arms bled. We learned to fire in controlled bursts, to reload in darkness, to strike in silence. Every mistake was punished not with death, but with humiliation. Krause would strike us with the flat of his blade, knocking us to the ground, then order us to rise again, always rise again. At night, when we returned to the dormitory, I found myself replaying his movements in my mind, the precision, the economy, the inevitability. He fought like a storm given form. I began to understand what he had meant when he told us we were not chosen for greatness. Greatness implied choice, purpose did not. Weeks passed. Organs multiplied. The Laraman's organ, granting rapid clotting. The catalepsian node, letting us rest one half of the brain, while the other stayed alert. Each addition stripped more of us away. Some didn't survive the surgeries. Others were driven mad by the constant indoctrination, their minds unable to hold both the memories of who they were and the commands of what they must become. Those men were taken by the apothecaries. We never saw them again. By the 5th month, there were only 8 of us left. We no longer used names, only numbers. I was 11. The boy named Tiber Joral was a ghost that haunted my dreams, a name without an owner. Then came the hypno-indoctrination. The machines hummed again, and we were strapped into the metal thrones once more. This time, the experience was worse, deeper, more invasive. They fed images directly into our minds, wars across 1,000 worlds, banners of the Imperium rising over alien corpses, the Emperor's face blazing like the Sunday. We were taught to love him, to fear him, to serve him. There was no line between faith and obedience. They were the same. Hours bled into days. I lost track of time. I forgot the shape of my own thoughts. When the sessions ended, I could recite battle liturgies and combat protocols in my sleep. My mind had become a weapon just as sharp as my body. And yet, sometimes, when I closed my eyes, I could still hear another voice, my own whispering from somewhere deep inside. Why? It was a small word, fragile and defiant, but it was there. Brother Chaplain Mordath crushed that whisper. He led us into the chapel for what he called the rite of understanding. We knelt in rows beneath the statue of the Emperor, its eyes burning with candlelight. Mordath paced before us, his voice a thunderclap. "You exist to serve. To question is to doubt. To doubt is to betray." He stopped before me, his skull helm lowering until the empty socket stared directly into my soul. "Do you doubt, Aspirant 11? The words hung like a noose. I felt the others watching. The silence pressed in on me like the weight of the planet itself. "No, Brother Chaplain," I said. The Vox grill hissed softly as he inhaled. Then he turned away. "Good. Doubt is human. You are not human." That night, I dreamed of fire. Not the cleansing fire of faith, but the devouring kind, the one that burns memory, identity, everything. The next day, the chaplain gathered us in the training yard again. His black armor glistened with sacred oils, his Crozius Arcanum crackling with power. "You have been reforged," he said. "Your flesh is no longer yours. Your mind belongs to the Emperor, but your loyalty must be tested." A servitor wheeled out a cage. Inside, a man knelt, chained and gagged. "A prisoner." "A heretic," Mordath said. "He once spoke against the Emperor. He will not do so again." He handed me a bolter, not a practice weapon, a real one. The weight was immense. "Kill him." The man looked up at me. His eyes were bloodshot, but human, terrified. My finger hovered over the trigger. For the briefest moment, I hesitated not out of mercy, but confusion. The man posed no threat. Mordath's voice roared through the chamber. Obedience is purity. Purity is strength. I fired. The bolt round detonated inside the man's chest, scattering flesh across the stone floor. The smell of blood filled the air. Mordath's helm turned toward me, and though I could not see his expression, I could feel his approval. "You are learning," he said. The others fired next. One by one, the chamber filled with thunder. When it was done, there was nothing left of the man but ruin, and nothing left of us but silence. In the weeks that followed, the guilt faded, not because I grew numb, but because the part of me that could feel it was gone. Each new implant, each sermon, each command chipped away at what remained of Tiber Jorel, until the name was meaningless and the number was all that mattered. When I looked at my reflection again, the face that stared back was hard, symmetrical, efficient. The eyes no longer looked for light, only for orders. We were not men anymore. We were blueprints, weapons, waiting for the final forge. And deep within me, where two hearts beat the rhythm of the Imperium, I knew that the boy who had been born in the underhive had truly died. All that remained was what the Emperor demanded. A weapon without doubt. They called it the Ordeal of Fire. No one told us where we were being sent, only that if we survived 7 days and returned with proof of our endurance, we would be considered ready for the next phase, the implantation of the gene seed. We stood in the hangar bay, 8 of us left, stripped of armor, dressed in simple fatigues. Our muscles coiled beneath skin that no longer felt our own, our twin hearts steady as metronomes of purpose. Each of us was given a combat knife, a survival beacon, and a single prayer etched into metal. The Emperor protects. We were told it was not a blessing, it was a command. Brother Sergeant Krause walked before us, his red armor stained with the dust of 1,000 battles. Behind him, the open hatch of the Thunderhawk gaped like the maw of a god ready to consume. "You will be taken to the world below," Krause said, "a place where nothing survives that does not deserve to live. You will find no shelter, no mercy, and no companionship. You will fight until the mountain itself knows your name or die nameless in the dirt." His voice reverberated through the hangar, calm and final. "Return with proof of your survival. Bring back the skull of a predator, the crest of a beast, the weapon of a fallen warrior. Bring something that screams, 'I have conquered this hell.'" No one spoke. There was nothing to say. The servitors sealed our beacons into our wrists, and one by one, we boarded the transport. As the Thunderhawk rose into the clouds, I looked back at the fortress monastery. It seemed less like a sanctuary and more like a prison that had finally decided to release its captives into something worse. The drop was fast, violent. Through the small viewport, I caught glimpses of the world below, a jagged expanse of red stone, boiling skies, and endless storms. The atmosphere shimmered with heat distortion, and lightning split the clouds like veins of fire. When the hatch opened, the heat hit me like a hammer. The world was alive, not with life, but with hunger. Every sound carried a promise of violence. The Thunderhawk rose again, leaving me in silence. For the first time since my conscription, there were no orders, no voices, no machine chants, just me and the world that wanted me dead. The gravity was heavier than any I'd known. My body ached under its pull, though my reinforced muscles adapted quickly. I scanned the horizon dunes of crimson ash stretched endlessly, broken by the silhouettes of blackened spires. In the distance, something moved massive, crawling, predatory. I began to walk. The first day was pure endurance. The sun or whatever passed for one hung low and enormous, bathing everything in a dull red glow. The heat was unbearable, yet my body refused to weaken. My enhanced physiology regulated itself, sweat evaporating before it formed. I found no water, no shade, no rest. The only sustenance I had was the ration block, which tasted like ash and metal. By nightfall, I had traveled far from the drop site, guided by instinct alone. Then the ground began to shake. A rumble like thunder rose from beneath the soil. The sand shifted, splitting open into a crater as something emerged, a creature the size of a transport, armored in black scales, its mouth a circle of teeth like spinning blades. It screamed, a sound so deep it vibrated inside my chest. It wore my knife. The thing lunged. Instinct took over. I rolled aside, its maw missing me by a meter, the air sucked from my lungs by its sheer force. The creature struck again, its body whipping through the air like a living whip of bone and sinew. I dove onto its back, the knife in my hand barely a toothpick against its armor. I struck again and again, the blade chipping, my arms burning. The creature bucked, throwing me into the sand. I landed hard, my ribs cracking, blood filling my mouth. Then I saw it a seam near the base of its head, where the scales met flesh. When it lunged again, I met it head-on, driving the broken knife into the seam and using my weight to force it deeper. The blade snapped, but I drove my fist in after it, feeling the warmth of blood and the shudder of muscle. The creature convulsed, then it stilled. I collapsed beside it, panting, my hands shaking. The fight had lasted only minutes, but it felt like hours. I looked at the corpse, my proof of survival, and felt no triumph, only exhaustion. I slept beside the carcass that night, using its cooling shell as shelter from the storm. On the second day, I woke to find carrion beasts feasting on the remains. Smaller things, four-legged and fast, their bodies covered in scales that shimmered like glass. I killed two before the others fled, then took one of their skulls as my prize. Its blood hissed against my skin, acidic, but my altered flesh healed before the burns could spread. The days bled together after that. Storms rolled across the plains, each one a wall of dust and fire. I learned to move between them, to use the terrain to shield myself. The constant rumble of distant predators reminded me I was never alone. At night, when the sky burned with red lightning, I thought of the fortress of Kraus, of Mordath, of Vaughn. I wondered if they remembered what it was like to be afraid. I doubted it. On the fourth day, I found the remains of another aspirant. His beacon still blinked weakly beneath the dust. His body was torn in half, entrails scattered like ribbons across the sand. I recognized him, number 16. He had been quiet, efficient, ruthless. I had thought he would survive. Beside him lay his proof, the skull of some enormous creature, cracked and blackened. I could have taken it and returned, but something stopped me. A voice, faint and distant, from a life that no longer belonged to me. Earn it. I left the skull where it lay. I buried him instead. Not because it mattered, not because I cared, but because someone had to. By the sixth day, I was no longer thinking clearly. Hunger gnawed at me. The ration block was gone. My muscles screamed for rest, but my body refused to yield. My second heart thundered like a war drum, my blood thick and metallic. I stumbled through a canyon, the walls closing in like the jaws of a beast. The air was heavy with the stench of oil and rot. That's when I heard it, a low growl that vibrated through the stone. From the shadows emerged another creature smaller than the first, but faster, smarter. Its eyes glowed with malice. It circled me, its claws clicking against the rock. I stood still, waited. When it leapt, I sidestepped, driving my knife into its flank. It screamed, twisting mid-air, its tail lashing across my face. I felt the skin tear. Warm blood ran into my eye. The creature came again, relentless. This time, I caught its jaw with both hands, forcing it open. My bones groaned under the strain, but I didn't stop. I twisted until something snapped. It fell limp. I stared at it for a long time, my chest heaving. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from something deeper, something close to exhilaration. For the first time, I felt powerful. Not because of the implants, not because of training, but because I had earned the kill. I took its skull. It was smaller than the first creature's, but the fight had been mine. That was enough. When I finally activated my beacon on the seventh day, the Thunderhawk arrived within the hour. The Marines inside said nothing as they loaded me aboard. The others were already there, 5 of us now. Each held something in their hands, bones, claws, trophies, proof. None of us spoke. When we returned to the fortress, Kraus was waiting on the landing pad. He looked at each of us in turn, his expression unreadable behind his helmet. "You have survived the Emperor's judgment," he said. "You will receive his gift." His words should have felt like triumph. Instead, they felt like an execution sentence. That night, as I lay in the dormitory, I tried to remember what it felt like to be afraid, but fear was gone, carved out of me as surely as my old organs. In its place was something colder. Resolve. Obedience. The boy who had once fought for scraps in the underhive would have marveled at the strength I now possessed, but that boy was long gone. He had been buried in the red sands of that cursed world, beneath the skull of the beast he'd slain. In his place stood something else, something born of pain, forged by faith, sustained by the will of a God who demanded nothing less than everything. When I slept, I dreamed of the Emperor not as a savior, but as a distant, burning Sunday, too bright to look upon, too far to touch. And in that light, I saw the truth that would haunt me forever. The boy had died, so the weapon might live. When the summons came, it was not through words. The vox in our quarters crackled with a single tone, low, resonant, metallic, the sound of destiny calling through machinery. We rose without question. Sleep, hunger, thought all forgotten. It was time. The apothecarian was colder than any place I had ever known. Not cold like absence, but cold like judgment. The air hummed with the sterile scent of disinfectant and blood. Steel tables stretched in perfect symmetry beneath the white glow of lumen strips. Servitors drifted between them, their human features buried under augmetic masks, their hands replaced by instruments that hissed and clicked in unison. Brother Apothecary Vaughn awaited us, still clad in his white robes. His face was a map of metal grafts and scar tissue, one eye human and weary, the other glowing red, whirring softly as it focused on us. "You have survived the first death," he said, his voice measured and mechanical. "Now, you will endure rebirth." The words were not meant to comfort. They were ritual, a declaration of intent. He gestured, and servitors began guiding us to the surgical slabs. "Strip," Vaughn commanded, his tone devoid of emotion. "The flesh you were born with is insufficient for the Emperor's purpose." We obeyed. Our robes fell away, and the room filled with the sound of bare feet on cold metal. We lay down, each onto a slab fitted with restraints. The metal bit into my skin. The servitors tightened the locks. Then the humming began. The first procedure was the implantation of the secondary heart. Vaughn recited a litany as he worked, his words synchronized with the movement of his tools. "The flesh is weak, the Emperor is strong, the body must be remade in his image." I was conscious, fully. The drugs paralyzed my muscles but not my mind. I felt every incision, every intrusion into my chest cavity. I felt my ribs being parted, the cold air kissing organs that should never have known light. When Vaughn inserted the new heart, a lump of engineered muscle pulsing weakly, I could feel it writhing against my own, struggling for dominance. For a moment, I thought it might reject me, that my body would tear itself apart in rebellion. But the pain shifted, deepened, found rhythm. Two hearts beat within me. One human, one divine. When Vaughn sealed the incision, his voice broke through the haze. "The first gift has been accepted." I tried to breathe, but the air came in gasps. I tried to scream, but my throat had forgotten how. Days bled into weeks. Each morning brought a new procedure. Each night, a new pain. The os modula came next, a crystalline gland inserted at the base of the neck, rewriting my skeletal structure. My bones thickened, reshaping themselves into something denser, heavier. Every movement became agony. I could feel my spine grinding as it lengthened, my skull tightening as if trying to contain too much thought. When I slept, I dreamed of metal growing within me, of machinery creeping through my veins. The biscopia followed an organ that accelerated muscle growth, forcing my flesh to outpace its own skin. I awoke one night to find my arms trembling from the pressure, veins bulging like cables. Then came the hemostamen, altering my blood, darkening it, making it viscous and metallic. It carried oxygen like liquid iron. The pain was no longer pain, it was identity. Between operations, we were subjected to hypno-indoctrination. We were strapped into iron thrones, neural cables driven into the back of our skulls. Vaughn's assistants attached the interfaces, whispering binary prayers. Through pain, we learn obedience. The world dissolved into visions. Endless sermons about the God Emperor. Liturgies of hatred against Xenos, heretics, mutants. The history of the Imperium streamed into my mind like a flood of molten light. Battle tactics, weapon schematics, doctrines of sacrifice and devotion. Hours, days, maybe weeks, vanished inside that storm of information. When I emerged, I no longer remembered where my thoughts ended and the Emperor's began. Brother Chaplain Mordath stood before us during one session, his armor black as the void, his skull helm reflecting the candlelight. "Knowledge without faith is heresy," he said. "Faith without pain is weakness. You will know both or you will die." His Crozius Arcanum, the holy weapon of the chaplaincy, crackled with energy as he raised it. The air trembled. "You think you suffer," he thundered. "The Emperor has suffered for 10,000 years. His flesh decays upon the golden throne, his will sustaining mankind. You will suffer gladly, for you are his instruments of war." His words carved themselves into my mind like runes. When I awoke later, I could still hear his voice echoing in my skull, whispering beneath the rhythm of my twin hearts. Not all survived. One aspirant's body rejected the catalepsian node, an organ that allowed us to rest half our brain at a time. He convulsed for hours before his body went still. Another aspirant died during the Laraman's organ implantation, the one that grants instant coagulation. His wounds refused to seal, his blood spilling across the surgical slab in rhythmic bursts. Vaughn did not stop the procedure. He simply watched the life leave the boy's eyes, then signaled a servitor. The corpse was removed, the tools sterilized, the table prepared for the next subject. "The Emperor wastes nothing," Vaughn said. "Even in death he serves." The next subject was me. By the 6th month, there were only 5 of us left. We had stopped using our names. Names were for men. We were material human ore being smelted into weapons. Our bodies were towers of sinew and bone. We stood 2 meters tall, our skin pale and taut, our movements precise. We no longer felt hunger as mortals do. Our preomna stomach filtered any substance into nutrient slurry. And yet, despite our strength, we were shadows, ghosts of something that once was human. The fortress echoed with our footsteps as we were led to the final implantation of this phase, the black carapace, the ultimate interface between man and armor. It was not merely surgery, it was communion. We were stripped naked once more, our chests and limbs marked with the sign of the Aquila. Then Vaughn approached, holding a bowl filled with black fluid that shimmered like liquid obsidian. "The Emperor's seal," he murmured. The fluid was alive nanoscopic machines, engineered to weave themselves into our flesh. When he poured it across my chest, it burned like acid. It seeped into my pores, burrowing under my skin, forming a network of microscopic sockets that would one day connect directly to my power armor. I screamed for the first time in months. Not from pain, but from something deeper, the realization that there was no going back. The carapace was the bridge between man and God. Once it was complete, I would no longer belong to either. Recovery took months. The pain never ceased, it only changed shape. My skin pulsed with faint currents, my nerves responding to signals not yet understood. When I touched metal, I could feel its texture as vibration, hear its hum like a heartbeat. The chaplains called it attunement. They said the Emperor was already whispering through our veins. I did not know if that was true, but I felt something, not comfort, not clarity, but presence. Sometimes, in the silence of the dormitory, I would hear a distant murmur, like a storm at the edge of perception. It might have been the Emperor, or it might have been madness. One evening, Brother Sergeant Cross visited the recovery wing. He stood before us in full armor, the red of his plate glowing under the lumen lights. Behind him, Banners of the chapter hung relics soaked in the blood of heroes. "You have been remade," he said, "but you are not yet brothers. The flesh must prove worthy of the faith that sustains it." He gestured to the doorway, where we saw new figures waiting, Marines clad in scout armor, silent and massive. "Tomorrow," Kraus continued, "you will undergo the trial of survival. You will be sent beyond this world, alone. You will bring back proof of endurance and strength. Only then will you receive the Emperor's full gift." He paused, letting the words settle like ash. "Those who fail will still serve." We all knew what that meant. Servitors, mindless husks, tools. The Imperium wastes nothing. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, a cathedral of metal and bone. My body thrummed with life that wasn't mine. My twin hearts beat in unison. My blood sang with foreign energy. I thought of Hive Secundus, of the rusted spires, the smoke, the gang fights. I thought of my mother's hands, scarred and trembling as she tried to feed me scraps. I thought of the man I had been, and realized I could no longer remember his face. The past was dissolving, not erased, but overwritten. I was becoming what they wanted me to be, an angel of death. Yet some fragment of me buried deep, hidden beneath layers of gene seed and indoctrination, still whispered, "Remember why." But there was no why anymore, only because the Emperor willed it. Because I had survived when others did not. Because the weapon must be born. The next morning, as the transport prepared for launch, I caught my reflection in a polished surface. A face pale as porcelain, eyes glowing faintly amber from the ocular implants, jaw too square, skin too smooth, veins faintly visible like golden threads beneath the surface. It was not a human face. Not entirely. I lifted a hand, enormous, powerful, perfect, and realized it trembled slightly. Was it fear or anticipation? I could no longer tell the difference. As the engines roared to life and the fortress walls fell away behind me, I understood one final truth. I was not ascending. I was being buried deeper into something far below humanity, deeper than faith, deeper than purpose, deeper than self. And though I no longer believed in miracles, I prayed anyway. "Emperor, if you can still see me, remember the boy I was. The boy who once looked at the stars and dreamed of escape. The boy who died the day they chose him. They called it the baptism of fire. Not because it was sacred, but because it burned away whatever remained that was still human." It began, as all things did in the chapter, with silence. We stood in the drop bay of the strike cruiser Vigilant Faith, 7 neophytes clad in scout armor, lighter than full Astartes plate, but still a cage of sacred steel and wiring. The air hummed with the low vibration of the ship's reactors, a mechanical heartbeat echoing our own. Above us, red lumen lights cast everything in the shade of blood. Brother Sergeant Tauron walked among us, his armor worn smooth by centuries of battle. His left eye was an augmetic lens that glowed faintly crimson. His voice, when he spoke, carried the weight of sermons and gunfire alike. "Today," he said, "you are no longer aspirants, you are blades unsheathed. You will serve in the Emperor's light and die in his name. You will not falter, you will not ask why." He stopped in front of me. "You will obey." I met his gaze, not as a man meets another man, but as a weapon meets its maker. He nodded once. That was enough. Our mission was a compliance strike on Carthan 9th, a hive world fallen into insurrection. What had begun as a labor revolt had turned into open rebellion. The planetary PDF had fractured, half turning traitor, half annihilated. The governor's last transmission had been a plea. The manufactorums burn. The workers worship false idols. Send the Emperor's angels. And so, we came. The Vigilant Faith entered low orbit, its cannons silenced, its fury restrained. Astartes do not bomb what they can purge by hand. We were deployed via Drop Pod 7 scouts under Tauron's command. As the clamps released, gravity seized us. The world outside became a roar of fire and screaming atmosphere. The pod rattled violently, the metal creaking like an animal in pain. My twin hearts raced, not with fear that had been burned away long ago, but with something colder. Anticipation. This was what I was made for. The pod slammed into the surface with bone-shattering force, the impact restraints released, and the hatches detonated outward in a burst of flame and dust. We emerged into chaos. The sky above Carthan 9th was red with fire. Towering spires of the hive burned, their metallic skeletons glowing against the smog. The air reeked of ash, oil, and fear. Gunfire cracked in the distance. Explosions shook the ground. Brother Tauron raised his bolt pistol and spoke into the squad channel. Formation Delta. Secure the refinery complex ahead. Eliminate resistance. Retrieve the governor's data cores if intact. We moved as one, no hesitation, no wasted motion. Each step synchronized, each breath measured. For all our transhuman enhancements, our scout armor still felt vulnerable, lighter than true plate, open to the world's elements. Perhaps that was intentional to remind us that we were not yet gods. We advanced through a shattered hab corridor. The walls were scorched, the ground littered with corpses. Civilians, mostly men, women, children crushed beneath fallen machinery or burned by promethium. Their eyes were open, empty. I stepped over them without breaking stride. And yet, something within me, something that had survived indoctrination and augmentation, stirred. They looked like the people from Hive Secundus. Dirty, starving, forgotten. The difference was that now I was the one holding the gun. We reached the refinery's outer perimeter. The rebels had fortified it with makeshift barricades, scrap metal, broken servitors, gutted transports. Through my scope, I saw them, ragged men and women, armed with stolen lasguns, their faces smeared with oil and ash. They wore tattered rags bearing crude symbols, 8-pointed stars, spirals of blood. Chaos. They had turned to the ruinous powers, to the promise of freedom from servitude. It was blasphemy, and in the Imperium, blasphemy is death. On my mark, Tauron said. A pause. Fire. The silence shattered. Our bolters roared, each round a miniature Sunday flesh and armor disintegrated. The barricade collapsed under the weight of explosive shells. I advanced through smoke and gore, firing methodically, each squeeze of the trigger an act of worship. There was no hesitation, no thought, only function. One rebel charged, screaming a name that was not the Emperor's. I shot him mid-leap, the bolt detonating in his chest. He folded in half, his body collapsing like paper. Another fled a boy, no older than I had been when they took me from the underhive. His weapon clattered from his shaking hands. I raised my bolter. My finger hesitated, just for a breath. His eyes met mine wide, terrified, human. Then Tauron's voice cut through the comms. Finish it. The boy's head vanished in a bloom of red mist. I did not feel anger, or pity, or anything at all. Only the recoil of my weapon. Hours later, the refinery was ours. The last of the rebels were executed in the courtyard, kneeling before the chapter's banner. The governor's data core was recovered, a black cube filled with records of production, quotas and resource yields. His corpse hung nearby, nailed to a servitor frame. Brother Tauron observed the scene in silence. His augmetic eye scanned the horizon. The Emperor's will is done, he said. We were ordered to remain behind as sentinels while the full Astartes detachment advanced deeper into the hive. That night, as the fires burned and the air filled with the stench of charred flesh, I sat among the ruins and cleaned my bolter. The motions were automatic, each stroke of the cloth, each check of the mechanism, performed with reverent precision. Then I noticed something, a reflection in the weapon's polished surface. My face, not the face of a man. Something else. Eyes too sharp, skin too pale. The faint tracery of veins beneath the surface glowed like faint circuitry. I looked at the reflection for a long time. Then I whispered not aloud, but somewhere deep within. Who are you? No answer came, only the faint hum of machinery within my flesh. When the sun rose, if that world even had a sun, we received new orders. The main force had encountered heavy resistance near the Manufactorum district. We were to flank and eliminate enemy command elements. We advanced through ruins and tunnels, moving in near silence. The only sounds were the click of boots and the distant echoes of battle. Then came the ambush. They struck from above, rebels wearing flayed armor and masks made from the faces of the dead. One landed directly on Brother Castor's back, driving a blade between the armor plates. Castor fell, choking, his blood steaming in the cold air. We returned fire instantly. Bolts detonated against concrete and flesh alike. I moved on instinct, sweeping left, knife in hand. A rebel lunged at me, wielding a jagged pipe. I parried, twisted, and drove the blade through his throat. He dropped to his knees, clutching at the wound, his eyes locked on mine, pleading not for mercy, but for recognition. And in that instant, I saw something that made my stomach twist, a mark branded into his chest. A winged skull, the symbol of the Imperium. It had been burned over, defiled. He had once been a soldier, maybe even a loyalist. Now he was meat. After the battle, we burned the bodies. Tauron stood over the pyres, the flames reflecting off his augmetic eye. "This is what faith without purpose becomes," he said. "Chaos preys on the desperate, on those who forget the Emperor's light." He turned to me. "Do you understand, Brother Jor-El?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Then speak it." I hesitated, then recited the catechism drilled into my skull during indoctrination. "The Emperor is our father and guardian. To doubt him is treason. To fail him is death. To question his purpose is heresy." Tauron nodded. "Good. Never forget that truth, even when it burns everything else away." He walked off, leaving me with the fire. I watched it consume the corpses, rebels and brothers alike. The heat washed over me, and I thought again of Hive Secundus. The smoke smelled the same. Only now, I was the one feeding it. By the campaign's end, 3 of our squad had fallen. The rest of us returned to the Vigilant Faith for debriefing. The apothecaries extracted the gene seed from our fallen brothers. It was a sacred act, efficient, impersonal, absolute. When I saw the small vials of milky fluid, each containing the essence of what had once been a man, I realized something chilling. That was all we were to them. Parts. Resources. Fuel for a war that would never end. Brother Sergeant Torrentus, commander of the 5th Company, addressed us before the campaign's end. His armor bore the scars of centuries, his voice calm but edged with steel. "You have fought well. You have obeyed. You have killed in the Emperor's name. You will now join the ranks of the full battle companies." The words echoed like a benediction and a sentence in one. When he placed his hand on my shoulder, I felt the weight of history, not just his, but the millions who had come before, each one a blade that cut and was replaced. "Remember this, Brother Jor-El," Torrentus said quietly. "We are not gods. We are function, tools forged in sacrifice. But even tools may wonder what they protect." He looked into my eyes. "One day, you will ask yourself that question. When you do, answer carefully." Then he left me standing in the hangar, surrounded by silence and the faint echo of burning worlds. Later that night, I sat before the shrine in my quarters, a small golden effigy of the Emperor, his face serene and eternal. I stared at it for a long time, the faint hum of the ship surrounding me. I tried to pray. No words came, only the question that would not die. What does a weapon protect when it has forgotten what it means to be human? The answer, if it ever existed, was lost somewhere in the void. The stars outside the viewport burned like the eyes of gods, cold, unblinking, indifferent. And I realized, with a strange sense of peace, that I had finally become what they wanted me to be. An angel of death. Not a man, not even a monster, something else entirely. It began with a summons at dawn. Not through voice, nor through command, but through silence. A servitor entered my chamber, its body a fusion of bone and rusted augmetics. It spoke only 2 words, filtered through static and vox distortion. "Hol, truth." Then it turned and left, the hiss of hydraulics echoing down the corridor. I rose immediately. There was no need to prepare. I had no possessions, no keepsakes, nothing to mark my existence beyond my service rifle and the armor on my back. Still, I paused before the small shrine in the corner of my quarters, a simple aquila carved from polished bone. For years, I had knelt before it in prayer, but now I only looked at it, feeling nothing. The prayers had become sounds, the faith, reflex, the emperor concept. And yet, as I turned away, I whispered anyway, "Guide me, if you still remember me." The Hall of Truth lay deep within the fortress monastery far below the barracks, the armory, even the catacombs where the gene seed was kept. Few spoke of it, fewer had seen it, and returned unchanged. The corridor leading there was lined with marble statues of long-dead brothers, each immortalized in a moment of valor. Some bore banners, others bolters, all frozen in the posture of absolute devotion. At the end stood a door of adamantium etched with the words, "Only through death may truth be revealed." 2 chaplains awaited me there. Brother Mordath, his skull helm gleaming under the lumen lights, and Apothecary Vaughan, still shrouded in white robes, the red glow of his augmentic eye tracking my approach. Between them stood Chapter Master Varnax, clad in full ceremonial armor, a relic older than most civilizations. The artificed gold and cobalt plates gleamed with purity seals and sacred wax. His face, what remained of it, was a tapestry of scars and augmetics, but his gaze held a terrible calm. He gestured toward the massive doors. "Enter, Brother Jarrell, leave behind all doubt." The Hall of Truth was circular, vast, and silent. Torches of chemical flame lined the walls, casting flickering shadows that danced across the faces of stone effigies. In the center stood a pedestal bearing a single weapon, a bolt pistol, ancient and scarred by use. It was the same model used since the founding of the Adeptus Astartes, an instrument of faith and finality. My armor clanked softly against the marble floor as I approached. Every step echoed back to me a dozenfold, as if the chamber itself whispered my sins. "Brother Jarrell," Varnax's voice filled the room, low and steady, amplified by the vox. "You stand here because you have endured the trials of transformation, you have conquered the flesh, you have mastered the mind, you have obeyed without hesitation." He stepped closer, his shadow towering over me. But obedience alone is not faith. There is one final truth to confront, one final test to prove that you have severed the chains of your former self. Mordath approached the pedestal, his armor creaking. He lifted the bolt pistol reverently, as if handling a relic of divine power. "This weapon," he said, "has ended hundreds of lives and begun just as many." He gestured toward the far end of the chamber. There, in the shadows, another figure stood. A space marine clad in full plate, helmet removed. He was tall, pale, scarred. His expression was calm, resigned. "This is Brother Thaddeus," Varnax said. "He has completed every trial, as you have. Only one of you will leave this chamber as a full battle brother of the chapter." My hearts froze. Mordath continued, "To ascend, you must sever the final tie to your past mercy, doubt, hesitation. You must kill without question. You must obey." He extended the bolt pistol toward me. "Take it." The weight of the weapon surprised me. It felt heavier than any bolter I had ever held, as though every death it had dealt still lingered in its frame. The handle was warm, almost alive. I looked across the hall at Thaddeus. His face was impassive. His eyes met mine briefly, no fear, no pleading, just understanding. We both knew what this meant. This was not combat. This was erasure. Varnax's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "One of you will leave as a space marine. The other will serve in death. This is the Emperor's will." I stood motionless. The air pressed down on me, thick with incense and expectation. A fragment of something, a voice buried deep, whispered in my skull, "Refuse." It was faint, human, a ghost. Tiber Joral's voice. The boy from the hive. The boy who had looked at the stars and dreamed of escape. the boy who was not supposed to exist anymore. Mordath's vox grill crackled. "Do not hesitate, brother. Hesitation is heresy." I raised the bolt pistol. The weapon's sight aligned perfectly with Thaddeus's forehead. He did not move. For a moment, I thought of all the years of training, the surgeries, the agony, the endless death and rebirth. I thought of the friends I had buried, the brothers reduced to vials of gene seed. I thought of what waited if I refused. Servitude, execution, disgrace. And then, the smallest flicker of thought, dangerous, forbidden, crept in. What if I am not supposed to survive this? What if this is the Emperor's way of showing me what I have become? But faith has no room for philosophy. Faith obeys. I exhaled, squeezed the trigger. The sound was absolute. Thaddeus remained standing for a heartbeat, then the back of his skull erupted in a flash of light and bone. His body collapsed to the floor, the impact reverberating through the marble like the tolling of a bell. Silence returned. Varnax stepped forward. "The flesh is weak," he intoned, "but the spirit endures." Mordath turned to me. "You are now truly Astartes. The last chain of your mortality has been broken." I lowered the pistol slowly. The air smelled of blood and gunpowder, and something else. Finality. Apothecary Vaughn knelt beside Thaddeus's corpse. His mechanical hand extended a needle-tipped probe, extracting the progenoid glands, the sacred genetic legacy of the chapter. "Even in death, he serves," Vaughn murmured. Then he looked up at me with his glowing red eye. "There is one detail you should know, Brother Jarrell," he said. "Brother Thaddeus's true name was Vex Garnon, once of Hive Secundus." The name struck like a blade. Vex. The rival gang leader I had killed before my conscription. The one whose throat I had cut beneath the rusted bridges of the underhive. The one who had haunted my dreams, the face that represented the violence of my old life. Vaughn's tone remained clinical. "The Emperor's design moves in ways beyond our comprehension." I stared down at Thaddeus's corpse. No triumph, no remorse, no recognition. Just the empty knowledge that the circle had closed. And I felt nothing. Varnax turned away, gesturing toward the exit. "Return to the armory. Receive your warplate. The Emperor calls you to serve." I saluted without thought. The words of ritual escaped my lips automatically. By his will, I am remade. By his light, I endure. As I walked out of the hall, the echo of my footsteps followed me like ghosts. Behind me, servitors lifted Thaddeus's body away. The doors sealed with a thunderous clang, and whatever part of Tiber Jarrell still lingered within me died there, buried under stone and scripture. Hours later, in the armory, I stood as the tech adepts performed the rites of armoring. Each plate of my power armor was anointed with sacred oils, each joint sealed with litanies of function. When the chest plate was locked into place, I could feel the black carapace beneath my skin linking with the armor's systems. The machine's spirit awoke, flooding my senses with data and sound. The world changed clearer, sharper, colder. The last piece was the helmet. The tech adept held it out to me reverently. "Brother Jor-El," he said, "the Emperor's angel is born anew." I lifted the helm, stared into its twin eye lenses, blank, emotionless, unending. I saw my reflection within them. Pale skin, amber eyes, perfect symmetry, no trace of humanity left. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I donned the helmet. It sealed with a hiss. The external world dimmed, replaced by a cascade of targeting data, oxygen readings, and purity code strings scrolling across my vision. The voice of the armor's machine spirit whispered in my mind, "Serve, endure, kill." And I obeyed. When I stepped out of the armory, Brother Sergeant Torrentus awaited me, the same Marine who had once spoken of purpose and humanity. He regarded me for a long moment, his expression unreadable beneath his helm. "You have passed," he said finally. "You are now of the 5th Company, the Emperor's will made manifest." He handed me my bolter newly sanctified, its casing engraved with my new designation. Brother Jorel. Not Tiber. Not son. Not man. Just a weapon. Torrentus's tone softened slightly. Your first deployment begins at dawn. You will see the truth of war soon enough. And perhaps, if you survive long enough, you will learn that there are truths even deeper than this hall can show. He paused. Do you understand? Through the vox, my own voice sounded strange, hollow, metallic. I understand function. He gave a small nod. Function comes first, purpose comes later, if it ever does. Then he turned away. As the lights dimmed across the fortress, I found myself alone in the corridor. I looked down at my armored hands, massive, precise, unyielding. I flexed them once. The servos hummed softly, like distant thunder. In that moment, I understood what the Hall of Truth had truly meant. It was not a place of revelation. It was a tomb. And inside it, the last remnants of the boy I had been were buried forever. Only Brother Jorel remained a name without history, a soldier without self. An angel of death. In the grim darkness of the far future, that is all there is. They said a space marine's life truly begins when he first steps onto a battlefield wearing the Emperor's armor. They were wrong. It doesn't begin. It ends. The warship Vigilant Faith drifted through the void like a cathedral of iron, its hull carved with prayers and names of the fallen. Inside its cavernous belly, hundreds of us prepared for war, chanting the litanies of hate, checking sacred weaponry, offering benedictions to the machine spirits that would carry our wrath to another world. I stood among them, one voice in the choir, my armor's vox harmonizing perfectly with the chants. Each syllable reverberated through the plating around my heart, merging man, metal, and purpose into one sound. But beneath it, deep below the ritual, there was silence, the kind of silence that remembers. Our destination was Malachor's Reach, a frontier world on the edge of imperial space. The astropaths had intercepted transmissions of heretical gatherings, cults forming in the Manufactoria, whispers of chaos symbols carved into walls, processions of chanting workers praising false gods. Where faith falters, angels descend. The Vigilant Faith entered low orbit under blackout protocols. Strike pods lined the launch bays like bullets, ready to be fired from heaven's gun. Brother Sergeant Torrentus briefed us. This world has forgotten its purpose. You will remind them, no survivors among the heretics. Secure the cathedrum of the Manufactorum Primus and hold until relieved. His words were a prayer disguised as an order. We repeated them back as one, by the Emperor's will. Then came the impact of ritual, the rite of embarkation. The Tech Marines walked among us, reciting hymns as they checked our armor seals. Incense filled the air. Servo skulls chanted binary verses. Each of us knelt while a chaplain anointed our helms with sanctified oils. Through faith, flesh becomes steel, intoned Chaplain Mordath. Through obedience, steel becomes divine. He placed his hand on my helm. I could feel his power armor humming a vibration that resonated deep inside my chest. Go forth, Brother Jorel, he said softly. Forget the self. Serve the function. The Emperor will know you when the stars burn out. The phrase lingered in my mind, echoing even as the drop pod doors sealed. When the clamps released, gravity claimed us. The descent was a scream through the atmosphere fire, consuming the edges of vision, the pod shuddering violently as it tore through the sky. My armor compensated, stabilizers humming to keep my spine intact. No fear, no thrill, only the rhythm of duty. Impact. The world exploded into dust and debris. The pod doors blew open. We stormed into the red haze of Malachor's Reach. The ground was ash, the sky a dying orange. Structures loomed in ruin manufactorums twisted by neglect and corruption. Banners of the eight-pointed star fluttered from collapsed cranes. Bolter fire erupted instantly. My targeting systems acquired heat signatures. Dozens, maybe hundreds, closing fast. Rebels, workers, turned zealots, their bodies painted with sigils of blood. We answered with holy thunder. My bolter roared in bursts, each round a hymn, flesh vaporized, limbs vanished, Screams dissolved beneath the percussion of war. Through my helmet's filters, I could hear my breathing steady, mechanical, alien. The machine spirit of the bolter purred approval. We advanced through the manufacturum's shattered corridors, moving in pairs, precision incarnate. The walls were covered in devotional graffiti blasphemies, painted over old imperial creeds. Flesh is freedom. The Emperor feeds on your pain. We remember the light you stole. I shot the heretic who had written the last line. He was still holding the brush when he fell. Inside the cathedrum, we met resistance fierce enough to crack ceramite. Cultists armed with stolen plasma guns and chain blades hurled themselves at us, chanting names that burned the ears, the dark gods whose syllables twist sanity. The first impact shattered the entry door. A wave of heat and noise swallowed us. Brother Garion went down in the first volley, his armor glowing red from the plasma strike. His scream became static as his internal systems overloaded. Torrentus barked orders through the comms, his voice calm even as the ceiling collapsed. "Form on me, purge the left flank." I obeyed without thought. Bolter rounds chewed through the enemy ranks. The smell of ozone and burning meat filled the air. A chain axe caught my pauldron, sparks cascaded like blood. I turned, smashed my opponent with a backhand, and fired point blank into his face. The bolt detonated, painting the wall behind him. As his body slid to the ground, I caught a glimpse of his eyes. Brown, human. They were the same color as my mother's. Something twisted inside me, a tremor of memory, gone before it could take root. There was no mother, no child, only function. Hours passed, maybe days. Time lost meaning. When the last heretic fell, Torrentus signaled the Vox. Cathedrum secure. Silence descended. The kind of silence that only exists after killing, stops heavy, suffocating, absolute. We stood among the corpses, bolters lowered, armor scorched and smoking. The fires cast us as statues, gold, red, and black, beneath an infernal sky. Brother Rennick removed his helmet. His face was pale, eyes distant. "Do you ever wonder," he said quietly, "how many of them prayed to the same emperor before they fell?" Torrentus looked at him. "The emperor hears all prayers, brother, but he answers only those who serve his design." Rennick nodded slowly. Then, after a pause, he said, "And what is his design?" Torrentus turned away. "To endure." After the battle, we erected purification pyres, the air filled with the acrid perfume of burning flesh. I was assigned to guard duty near the perimeter. The flames reflected off my armor like liquid gold. The heat warped the air, and for a moment it looked as if the Emperor himself were descending in light and smoke. Then I realized I was staring at my own reflection. A giant of metal and perfection, face hidden behind an unfeeling mask. For the first time, I wondered if this was what the people saw when they prayed, not salvation, but us. Gods of fire and fear. Angels who burned worlds so that order might live another day. I could hear the faint sobs of survivors echoing from the ruins, workers who had fled the cult's reach, now trembling at the sight of their supposed saviors. I turned away. Mercy was not function. That night, when the battle was over and the wounded tended, I stood alone at the edge of the burning plain. Above me stretched the void, endless and indifferent. My armor's systems murmured quietly, listing ammunition counts, oxygen levels, heart rate. I disabled the HUD. For the first time in years, I looked at the stars with my own eyes. They seemed smaller than I remembered. Faint, distant. Perhaps they had always been that way, and I had simply forgotten what wonder felt like. I tried to recall my mother's face again, or my own reflection as a child, or the sound of laughter in the underhive streets, but those images were gone, dissolved into static. There was only the mission, the Emperor, and silence. A soft tone in my helm announced incoming Vox. "Brother Jorel," said Torrentus. His voice was quieter now, stripped of command. "Report to observation deck Gamma." I obeyed. The deck overlooked the burning city. Thousands of fires shimmered below like a living constellation. Torrentus stood there, helmet off, his face illuminated by the flames. His eyes, old, tired, and scarred, watched the horizon. "You fought well today," he said. "Yes, brother, Sergeant." He nodded, still gazing downward. "Do you feel it, Jor-El? The silence after battle?" "Yes. It is the truest sound of war, not the screaming or the gunfire. It is the silence that follows the absence of purpose when all targets are gone." He turned to face me. "That silence will be your only companion. Learn to live with it." I didn't know how to answer. Torrentus smiled faintly, a weary human gesture that looked out of place on a face like his. "When I was first anointed as Astartes, I believed we were gods, immortal, righteous. Now I know better." He gestured toward the burning manufactorum. "We are not gods, brother. We are instruments, and instruments do not choose the song they play." He placed a gauntleted hand on my shoulder. "But sometimes, when the melody fades, you might hear something else, something small, something fragile. That sound, that is what's left of who we were. Protect it, even if you never understand it." Then he left me there, surrounded by stars and fire. When the vigilant faith departed Malakor's reach, the world was declared purified. The data cores were secured, the manufactoria restored, the reports sent to Terra. We moved on. We always move on. Each planet blurs into the next names forgotten, faces erased, victories identical. I fought in 100 more campaigns, saw brothers fall, saw worlds burn. Each time, the same thought lingered. Is this what perfection costs? Sometimes, when the lights dimmed in the barracks and the ship drifted through the endless void, I would remove my helmet and touch the side of my face, as if searching for something beneath the skin, some trace of warmth that might still be mine. It was never there. Only the hum of the machine. They say the Emperor sees all, that he watches his angels from his golden throne, guiding our hands, blessing our wars. If that is true, I hope he cannot see inside my mind. Because sometimes, in the silence, I still hear the boy's voice, faint, defiant. Why? It echoes between the beats of my twin hearts, between the pulse of the armor's systems. It is not loud, not even real, just the ghost of a question no soldier should ask. And yet, it will not die. One day, during a campaign on a nameless moon, I found myself alone amid the aftermath of battle. The enemy was gone, the field silent. I stood among shattered armor and blood-stained soil. My bolter was empty. A wounded rebel crawled toward me, his body broken, his hand outstretched. His voice was weak, trembling. "Please, help me." He was young, barely a man, his face half burned, his eyes still human. For a moment, I simply watched him. Then I knelt beside him. His breathing hitched surprise, maybe hope. I reached out. My gauntleted hand rested against his forehead. He looked up at me, tears cutting tracks through the soot. "Are you an Engel?" I hesitated. The answer should have been easy. The catechism burned in my mind. We are the Emperor's angels, his wrath made flesh. But I couldn't speak it, because for the first time, I understood what I was looking at. Not an enemy, not a heretic, just a boy. A reflection. I pressed my palm gently against his skull, not in violence, not in mercy, and whispered through the vox. "No." He died quietly. Not from my hand, from his wounds, but I stayed there beside him until his last breath. That night, when the ship left the moon behind, I went to the viewport and watched the world shrink into darkness. In that silence, I understood the final truth, the one no sermon or indoctrination had ever spoken. Perfection was never divine. It was the absence of choice. And faith, true faith, was not in killing for the Emperor. It was in remembering what you had to destroy to serve him. I am Brother Jor-El of the 5th Company, Angel of Death, servant of the Imperium. I have killed without question. I have obeyed without thought. And somewhere, deep within this armor, a whisper remains faint but unyielding. The boy had died so the weapon might live. And in the endless dark between the stars, That whisper is all that keeps me human.